I gripped the steering wheel as my truck rolled down Maple Ridge Road, the familiar path home. The gravel crunched beneath my tires, but something felt off. I could always smell home before I saw it. The scent of fresh earth, sun-warmed wheat, and the clean country air. But today, that familiar comfort was gone. Then I saw it. My foot slammed the brakes. Where my family's golden fields once stretched across the horizon, a massive concrete structure stood instead. The morning sun reflected off its windows, glaring at me like 1,000 accusing eyes. A hotel, a 3-story monstrosity, sitting on my land. For a moment, my breath stopped. I blinked, hoping it was some kind of optical illusion, some cruel trick my tired mind was playing. But no, it was real. My farm, my grandfather's farm, my father's farm, my home, was gone. I stumbled out of the truck, my boots hitting the dry, foreign pavement of a brand-new parking lot. There was no wheat, no barns, no familiar dirt beneath my feet. Only asphalt, manicured bushes, and a corporate sign that mocked me. A construction worker in a bright orange vest spotted me. He walked over, clipboard in hand, shifting uneasily. "Can I help you, sir?" His voice sounded distant, like I was underwater. My name barely escaped my lips. This is my land. I heard my phone buzz in my pocket, but I couldn't look away. The worker swallowed, his eyes darting to the hotel like he was waiting for permission to speak. Before I could demand answers, my phone buzzed again. "Sarah, Richard, emergency. Call me now." The way of the message snapped me back into reality. I took a breath, my hand shaking as I dialed. "Sarah, what the hell is going on?" Her voice was tight, urgent. "I tried to call you last week." "Richard, they built it while you were gone. The HOA. The HOA. My stomach twisted. Sarah's voice cracked. Karen Reynolds pushed it through. They claimed it was for community improvement. They said they had the rights. "Richard," I fought them, but... "Don't say it," I whispered. "Don't tell me we lost our land." Silence. My mind reeled. My grandfather had fought for this land. He had raised a family on this soil, just as his father before him had. 4 generations. Blood, sweat, and time poured into these fields. And in a matter of weeks, it had been stolen. I turned, my jaw tight, my fists clenched. This wasn't just about land. It was about legacy. And I wasn't going down without a fight. A large approval sign stood near the entrance, its bold letters taunting me. Willowbrook Community Development. Approved by HOA Board. At the bottom, in small but unmistakable print, Karen Reynolds, HOA President. My breath burned hot in my chest. Karen Reynolds, the self-appointed queen of our small town. She had spent years nitpicking my farm. The fences weren't straight enough. The wheat fields looked unkempt. The tractors were too loud. Now, she had done what she always wanted. She had taken my land. I marched toward a stack of construction papers sitting on a nearby table. My hands flipped through them, my pulse hammering. Zoning permits. Legal approvals. Every page told the same story. A well-executed land grab, designed to look legitimate. But something was off. My name wasn't on any of these. No signed agreement, no notice, nothing. That's when I saw it. A tiny clause buried in legal jargon, marked with an unfamiliar term. Community Improvement Zone. The word sent a chill down my spine. They had rewritten the rules while I was gone. They had found a loophole. But loopholes work both ways. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was ready for war. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I dug. Deep in my old barn, I found them, my grandfather's documents. A dusty file cabinet filled with old maps, letters, legal records. He had kept everything. For the first time, I understood why he had fought this fight before. In the 1970s, the HOA had tried to redraw property lines, claiming abandoned land for new developments. But my grandfather had stopped them, and he had left behind the blueprint to do it again. I spread the documents across my desk, my hands shaking as I flipped through pages of old zoning laws, historical records, and land agreements dating back nearly a century. And there it was, the answer, a grandfather clause, buried in an old legal agreement, a protection placed on our land decades ago. They hadn't accounted for it. They thought they had covered their tracks. But they had missed something. A single mistake that would bring their empire crashing down. The next morning, I walked into the HOA meeting prepared. Karen sat ahead of the table, surrounded by her usual supporters. She smirked as I entered, but I saw something in her eyes, hesitation. "Richard," she said smoothly, her voice fake as ever. "This is an unfortunate misunderstanding." I dropped the stack of documents onto the table. She flinched. "You mean this misunderstanding?" I said, flipping open the grandfather clause. "The one that legally protects my land from ever being rezoned?" A murmur spread across the room. Karen's smirk vanished. I leaned forward. "You stole my land," I said, my voice low, steady. "And now I'm taking it back." Karen opened her mouth, but I wasn't finished. "I have documents. I have legal proof. And I have something you don't, a town that's sick of you stealing from them." Murmurs turned into voices of agreement. People who had been too scared to speak before were finally finding their courage. I stood up. "You built that hotel like you own my farm. But that hotel is coming down. And you're done." Karen's face paled. For the first time, she realized she had lost. Karen Reynolds battle was the kind of woman who always got her way. I wasn't backing down. She had ruled the Homeowners Association like a dictator, hiding her greed behind polished speeches about community progress. But today, she looked nervous. And that told me everything I needed to know. The HOA meeting room buzzed with whispers as I laid my grandfather's documents on the table. The same papers that proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that the land was never legally theirs to take. Karen cleared her throat, forcing a smile. "Mr. Holloway, this is hardly the place to discuss private matters." I leaned forward, my voice calm but sharp. "This isn't private. You stole my farm in broad daylight. And now, everyone's going to see the truth." The room fell silent. I flipped open a zoning map from 1952, running my finger along the bold, black boundary lines. "This," I said, "is my land, has been for generations. And according to this clause," I pointed to a paragraph in faded ink, "no commercial development can take place without written consent from the original landowner." That's me. A man in the back adjusted his glasses. "So the hotel is illegal?" I turned the page. Not just illegal, fraudulent. They knew this clause existed. They just thought no one would catch them. Karen's nails dug into the table. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "We followed every legal procedure." I smiled. "Really?" I slid another document forward. "Because according to the county records, you never filed the environmental assessment required for a commercial project of this size. Which means," I let the silence stretch, "that entire hotel is a violation of state and federal law." Karen's face went pale. The room erupted. Something changed that day. For the first time, people started asking questions. I had spent weeks thinking I was alone in this fight, that it was just me and Sarah against a machine too powerful to stop. But I was wrong. After the meeting, a woman I barely knew approached me outside the community center. She hesitated, glanced over her shoulder, then lowered her voice. "My father had land on the other side of town," she whispered. Karen forced him to sell. She made his life miserable until he gave up. I frowned. Why hasn't anyone spoken up? Fear. She swallowed. People think the HOA controls everything. They don't want to be next. A deep anger settled in my chest. How many people had suffered because of Karen? How many had lost their homes, their businesses, their peace of mind? But now, something was different. People weren't just whispering anymore. They were talking. And I knew once the truth started spreading, it couldn't be stopped. Fighting Karen wasn't just about lawyers and documents. It was a mental war. And some days, it felt like I was losing. One night, after hours of reviewing paperwork, I sat on the porch, staring at the distant hotel lights glowing against the dark sky. Sarah walked out, a cup of coffee in each hand. She handed me one and sat beside me. "You need to rest," she said softly. I exhaled, rubbing my face. "They took everything, Sarah. And even though we're fighting back, I keep wondering, what if we lose? She took my hand. Then we fight harder. I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman who had stood by me through every storm, who had defended our home even when I wasn't here to help. Karen's powerful, I muttered. She has connections, money, influence. And we're just what? Sarah interrupted. Just a family? Just farmers? She shook her head. No, Richard, we're something she'll never be. She squeezed my hand. We're right. And the truth is stronger than anything she's built. I let her words sink in, because deep down, I knew she was right. And I wasn't going to let fear stop me now. The next morning, I woke up to something unexpected. News vans. A local journalist had gotten wind of our fight. And just like that, the story exploded. Reporters knocked on my door. Community members who had never spoken up before suddenly had plenty to say. Karen forced my brother to tear down his workshop. She raised our HOA fees every year, but never explained where the money went. They tried to fine me for having a garden in my own backyard. It wasn't just about my farm anymore. Karen's entire empire was starting to crack. And then the real bombshell dropped. A county official, someone who had helped approve the hotel permits, came forward with evidence. Emails, paper trails, secret deals. Karen hadn't just stolen my land. She had been stealing from the entire town. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected place. An old manila envelope slid under my door. No return address. Inside, a series of aerial photographs dating back 30 years. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at, but then I saw it, a pattern. Property lines changing, shifting year after year. The same thing had happened before. And Karen had been behind it the entire time. Sarah stared at the photos, her hands trembling. She's been doing this for decades, Richard. Moving lines, changing records, pushing people out. And no one ever fought back hard enough to stop her. Until now. I picked up my phone and called Marcus, my lawyer. We have her, I said. The next morning, I filed a lawsuit. And this time, it wasn't just about my farm. It was about every person she had ever taken from. The courtroom was packed. Neighbors, reporters. Even people from outside town had come to witness the battle that had been brewing for months. The fight against Karen Reynolds and her corrupt HOA was about to reach its climax. I sat next to my lawyer, Marcus, who had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Across the aisle, Karen adjusted her blazer, her usual confidence crumbling at the edges. The court will now hear closing arguments in the matter of Holloway versus Willowbrook Homeowners Association. The judge's voice echoed through the room. Marcus stood first, his steps measured, his voice sharp. Your Honor, this case is not just about one piece of land, he began. This is about a pattern, a long history of deception, manipulation, and abuse of power. He turned, holding up a stack of zoning records, emails, and fraudulent documents. Here is proof that Karen Reynolds and the HOA deliberately altered property lines, forcing families out of their rightful land. This was not a simple mistake. This was theft. Karen's lawyer stood, trying to dismiss our claims. Your Honor, these accusations are baseless. Marcus cut him off. Baseless? He flipped open another document. Here's an email from Mrs. Reynolds, instructing a county official to fast-track the permits of the hotel without proper approval. A murmur spread through the crowd. I watched Karen's face tighten. For the first time, she realized she had lost. The judge didn't need long to deliberate. When she returned, the gavel hit the desk with a decisive thud. Based on the overwhelming evidence, she said, this court finds that the hotel was constructed under fraudulent circumstances. It is, therefore, to be demolished immediately. The room erupted. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment. Neighbors cheered. Some even hugged me. But I wasn't done yet. I stood up, facing Karen, who sat frozen, her world collapsing around her. You took my farm, I said. You spent years bullying this town. But now, you don't control anything anymore. She didn't respond. She had nothing left to say. And just like that, the walls of her empire began to crumble. Watching that hotel come down was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. One by one, the walls collapsed, the metal framework groaned. The land, my land, was being restored. Sarah and I stood near the edge of the property, the wind carrying the scent of fresh soil. "We did it," she whispered. The battle had been long, but we had won, and we weren't going to waste the victory. With help from the community, we started rebuilding not just our farm, but our town. People who had once been afraid of Karen stood taller now. Farmers who had been pushed out started returning. Small businesses that had struggled under HOA restrictions began to thrive again. This wasn't just about reclaiming land. It was about reclaiming our future. A few weeks after the demolition, I found myself back in the barn, sorting through my grandfather's old papers. I ran my fingers over the yellowed pages, feeling the weight of generations of hard work and resilience. He had always told me, "Land isn't just dirt, Richard. It's a promise. You care for it, and it cares for you." For the first time, I truly understood what he meant. Sarah walked in, carrying a small wooden box she had found in the attic. "You should see this," she said, handing it to me. Inside was a letter dated 30 years ago. My grandfather had written it, not knowing when or if I'd ever read it. "If you're holding this, it means someone tried to take what's ours. But remember this, son, land only belongs to those who love it, not those who try to steal it. They may come with contracts and lies, but as long as you stand your ground, they will never truly own it." I swallowed the lump in my throat. My grandfather had seen this battle coming long before I was born, and because of his wisdom, we had been ready. The land healed. The community thrived. And then one evening, my phone rang. It was a reporter from a national news station. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "your story has inspired people all over the country. Would you be willing to share it?" I looked out over my fields, where fresh wheat had begun to grow again. I thought about everything we had fought for: justice, legacy, truth, and I smiled. "Yes," I said, "I'd be honored to, because this wasn't just about me. It was about every small town, every family farm, every hard-working person who had ever been told that they were too small to fight back. This was proof that they weren't. That one person can make a difference, and that, in the end, truth always wins."